Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai rofeh hacholim. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, healer of the sick.
Oseh shalom bimramav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael, v'yakol Israel, v'imaru, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Many years ago, when Golda Meir was the Prime Minister of Israel, she would say that the time for peace will come when her enemies realized that they loved their children more than they hated their enemies' kids. She knew that there was something deep down about hatred and trust that was at the core of the conflict. And just today, a new movie opened up about Abraham Lincoln. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I've read the book upon which it's based. Lincoln understood this fear and distrust question better than most. And when Lincoln led our country through the Civil War, he knew he was doing so in a nation where families themselves were split. It wasn't even a question of loving my son more than hating yours. It was loving my son more than my daughter, my brother more than my other brother. It was an extraordinary challenge for him as the president and for our country as a whole. But this notion of conflict within family and of how to deal with the other is nothing new. This last week, we all participated in a great act of democracy. At least I hope we all did. I hope we all got a chance to vote. When we did so, we made a choice. I hope most of us made a choice that was in favor of one as opposed to in opposition of the other. But I know that there are moments at the ballot box where it isn't that way, where it's plugging our nose and picking the best of two bad choices. But that moment for choosing and for putting the two opposite each other has passed. We voted on Tuesday. The votes have been tabulated. Winners and the losers have been determined. Now comes the time for reconciliation. Now is the time when we have to look at each other and say, no matter how much I disagree with you, no matter how much I may fear you, no matter how much I may distrust you, you're my partner, and it is with you that I need to make peace. In that sense, the old adage is true. We don't make peace with our friends, we make peace with our enemies. This fighting comes at a time when our Torah portion talks about this directly, though so quickly in passing that it gets passed by. Our Torah portion this week is Chaye Sarah, which is a euphemism. Chaye Sarah means the life of Sarah. It's a euphemism because the Torah tells the story not of Sarah's life, but rather of her death. And we learn at the beginning that Sarah dies after a long life, and Abraham moves forward and finds a plot of land to bury her, and he mourns her. And then a little bit later in the portion, there's this set of verses that comes along that tells us of the end of Abraham's life. That Abraham lived to a good, long, advanced age, that he had another wife and more children. and that two of his sons joined together to bury him. And those two were Isaac and Ishmael. And there the two boys stood together. Imagine that. Isaac and Ishmael together at the open grave of their father. The text records no discord, no difficulties, no dishonor even. In fact, the text records that the two honorably and with dignity brought their father to his final resting place. And in that moment, so much is possible for us, and too easily we skip by it. Now, Midrash goes into all sorts of explanations. The one that you hear the most and is the loudest is one that says that Ishmael finally repented for all of his misdeeds. But if you look back in the text, Ishmael didn't have any misdeeds. Ishmael hadn't done anything. Ishmael's mother and Sarah didn't quite get along with each other, and they fought. And Ishmael and his mother were kicked out eventually, but there was nothing for him to repent for. So why is it that our tradition teaches that? Well, simple. The land is ours. Abraham is our father. It's our God, not the other side. Even our own tradition that we hold sacred sometimes goes in the wrong direction. And this is one of those instances, at least in my mind, where our tradition doesn't fully explain that the conflict between Isaac and Ishmael was not one that either of them sought out, but rather it was a family conflict that they both were subjected to and that they had to work through. And it's clear by the time of Abraham's death that the two boys had done just that. They had worked through the conflict, and they were able to mourn together, to grieve together, and to move forward in creating a new normal together. So what do we do with that? Well, a couple of things. First, I don't think there's a single person among us who hasn't had conflicts in our own family, whether it's with a sibling or between our children or between us and someone else. We all see familial conflict. It's a part of our existence. Imagine, though, that conflict becomes the basis for a worldwide geopolitical problem 5,000 years from now. Would it make you turn to your relative with whom you have a disagreement and try and work it out? I think that's the first piece. That while the problem is still small and manageable, that's the time to deal with it. To not let it get blown out of proportion and to not let it become something bigger because you don't know what's going to happen down the road. Second, if Isaac and Ishmael can reconcile, what's our excuse? If Isaac and Ishmael can stand together, why can't Boehner and Obama? Why can't the Democrats and the Republicans find a deal? If those two boys who had enormous conflict and enormous pain could do it, why can't our leaders now? And this then becomes our challenge, to help guide our leaders to that point. The election results were good and bad depending on our own political views. To me, one of the most troubling pieces of news that came out of it was the reporting, and I hope it's not accurate, but I suspect it is because it's come out in multiple sources, that the Speaker of the House wouldn't take a call from the President on the night of the election. He said he was asleep, and he wouldn't wake up and take the call. I'm a big believer in sleep, don't get me wrong. I love a good night's sleep. My wife will attest. But if the President calls, you answer the phone. Doesn't matter what time. And if our leaders can't figure out that simple piece, then we have to teach them. Our voting was one way of teaching, but there are other ways too. And we've got to push this forward. Third, if Isaac and Ishmael could stand together, then we Jews can't allow ourselves to be isolated and to not interact with our Muslim cousins, because that's who they are. They are our cousins. And if Isaac and Ishmael, the two progenitors, could do it, so can we. And so on this Shabbat of what I pray is the beginning of reconciliation, on a Shabbat that we celebrate Chayei, the life of the matriarch. Let us accept the discords that existed. Let us accept the results that occurred. And let us renew our own commitments to reconcile as our ancestors did, and to nudge our world ever closer to the notion of peace and wholeness that this Shabbat represents. If we do that, then it doesn't matter who won on Tuesday, because ultimately, we'll all win. Shabbat Shalom. Here I thought we were going to have a musical interlude. I was wrong.
Not yet. We're not ready for that yet.
Okay.
Sorry.
I hope you'll have a chance to look through the insert you received when you entered. We have a bunch of wonderful programs coming up, and I want to make sure that you're aware of them. On Tuesday evening, my friend Rabbi Dennis Ross will be here. Dennis is a rabbi in Albany and is deeply involved in a place where politics and religion merge. He is very involved in Concerned Clergy for Choice and has worked significantly with Planned Parenthood and has written a new book called All Politics is Religious, and he talks about where politics and religion come together and where they shouldn't. It's a fascinating conversation, and I think you'll get a real kick out of Dennis and all that he has to teach us. So I hope you'll join us on Tuesday. Before that, though, tomorrow evening, we have a wonderful Shabbaton program from 5 to 7 p.m. It's sort of a notion of the old radio vignettes. We have 3 temple members, Jesse Kerwitt, Dan Bostic, and Bana Rubino, who will be telling short stories. We'll have light refreshments and Havdalah as well. It'll take place here tomorrow at the temple at 5 o'clock. Next Friday evening, we have a Shabbat potluck dinner. Services will begin at 6 o'clock, and the potluck dinner will follow. And you'll see there is a note in the insert tonight also about our cantorial search. As you've heard, I'm sure, our beloved cantor has decided that Friday nights are more fun for family than they are for...
No.
She has well earned the notion to retire on her terms, and she has chosen to do it. And while it bothers, at least me personally, that we'll be bidding adieu, she's certainly...
I won't be a stranger.
She better not be a stranger. And
no.
more than that, the rest of us will be jealous. But our cantorial search committee is up and running. Margie Johnson is ably chairing it, and they very much want to hear from the members of our temple on what we need in a cantor, what we would like to have in a cantor, all of those sorts of questions, not so much to evaluate where we've been, but more to look forward to what we may yet be. There will be a series of town hall meetings to let your voice be heard. Sunday, November 11th at 10 here at the temple, at 2 o'clock that same day in the afternoon at the Oaks, the following day, Monday the 12th here at the temple, and Wednesday the 14th at the temple. In addition, there will be a survey online, and you'll be receiving information in the mail. One way or another, I urge you, let your voice be heard. If not, you're likely to hear my voice singing, and I know that's not a good thing. My thanks to all the members of the band, Mark, Evan, Meryl, Barb, a new grandmother, Todd, Sid, and Alan back on the drums. We're thrilled to have you all here.